Test, test. Test, test. Test.
Salut.
Salut.
Ça va?
Ouais, ça va.
On est déjà en live sur YouTube?
Ouais, tu peux le refaire. Bon.
Ah, mais il va y avoir un problème, c'est que l'idée, c'est que d'abord, on va se réunir le jury.
Ah oui, en fait, ça, on a testé hier soir avec Christophe. Il va renvoyer un nouveau lien pour le jury.
Ah,
Ouais.
attends.
Quand vous avez fini la réunion, vous devez changer en cette salle.
Parce que du coup, il a envoyé un lien, mais je pensais que c'était le même.
Non, il n'a pas encore envoyé, il va envoyer ici, dans la chat.
Ah oui, parce que pour l'instant, c'est le même. Ok.
Pour l'instant, c'est le même. On attend tous les membres qui se connectent. Après, il va envoyer le lien.
Mais tu peux pas mettre en pause des fois le stream?
Non, ça marche pas. Il faut qu'on arrête le stream.
Est-ce que... Ok.
Salut Marcos.
Bonjour Thomas. Ça va?
Ça va.
On est en live sur YouTube, je te préviens avant que...
Ah, que je dise des conneries.
Voilà.
Du coup, ça c'est le Zoom pour le jury ou comment ça se passe? Parce que j'ai vu qu'un seul lien.
Alors, apparemment, Christophe va créer après un autre lien, mais en fait, à mon avis, Kaixing, tu pourrais tout simplement créer une salle, non? Un waiting room.
Créer une sous-salle.
Ouais, une salle d'attente, enfin une room, et où on serait, tu pourrais nous mettre dans la room.
Et surtout que, je sais pas, Christophe avait dit qu'il voulait qu'on vienne un petit peu avant pour discuter de je ne sais quoi. Donc, mais ouais, il peut faire une room pour ça, ouais.
Thiago.
Hello.
How are you
Good
doing?
afternoon. How are you?
Good.
Fine.
Hello, Nicolas. Hello, Florence.
Bonjour.
I think we are almost all here. We're just waiting for Christophe.
Yeah.
Okay, so Christophe is here. Since the meeting now is being streamed live on YouTube, we will need to put ourselves in a different room to discuss as a jury. So
Hello,
Christophe?
everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Everybody is here?
Right.
Yeah.
I can see. I can see
waiting.
Florence. Thiago is here. Hi, Thiago.
Hello, Christophe.
And Niklas is here too. Hi, everybody.
Good morning. Sorry, my internet's acting funny, so I'm leaving my video off to make sure that we have enough bandwidth.
No worries, no worries. Good. Hello, Florence.
Hello.
Okay. Are we already on YouTube?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we switch back to another link then.
So Christophe, instead of going to another meeting, I think Kaixing can just create a room and put us in a room.
Are you sure this second room is not broadcasted on YouTube?
No, because he's broadcasting through an account, right, Kaixing?
In fact, I'm not sure.
Well, you can try. Put me in a room, and we'll see if. But I don't think so, because you created a Zoom account that is being used to broadcast what this account is saying. So if this account you don't put it in the room.
Okay.
Bonjour.
Salut, Anke.
Vous m'entendez bien?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I will put you all in another room. Yeah. So we can try.
Except the live YouTube account.
Yeah, except the live YouTube and me.
Je vais repasser dans un autre écran. Are we ready to begin? Christophe, is
Yeah.
everybody?
I think so. Everybody's here, yeah.
Voilà.
Niklas,
No.
Niklas is missing.
Yeah, I think he will come back soon.
Yeah, maybe he because when we leave the room, there are two buttons: leave the room or leave the meeting. So maybe.
Yeah, I close the session in 20 seconds.
Okay.
He will come.
Yeah, somebody has to click the wrong button. It's just probabilities, statistics.
Okay.
Okay,
Ah.
see.
Where is he?
So we can start?
Is that okay with you, Niklas? Can you hear us?
I'm sorry, is what?
Is that okay? We were waiting for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confused. So this is very different than how we do it. So usually there's like the presentation and then we go with questioning. So I'm not. I actually would almost rather someone go
sorry.
first,
We
but I
were
feel-
waiting for you to join the room, this room.
Oh.
There will be now the presentation.
I don't see the. I'm not seeing the invite here.
You don't see the main screen?
I'm using a screen reader and sometimes it doesn't pop up. That's a little weird. It popped up the first time.
So I have two screens. One is with the videos, the 9 videos, and one is the Kaixing presentation.
I mean, I'm not going to probably even follow I'm not going to look at the video anyway. So as long as I can hear Kaixing, I'm fine.
Do you want to us to share the PowerPoint with you directly?
Oh, yeah, that probably would have been helpful before, but I mean, that would be potentially helpful, but I think I'll just ask questions. So if there's, when you're going through data graphs, if you would just try to describe them, that would be the most helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Kaixing, did you put your last PowerPoint on the cloud?
No, not the latest version, I think.
You want to send the last one to Niklas if he can open and maybe look.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I could then follow along that way.
Yeah.
But I will, if you don't mind, I may jump in just to say, can you describe something more if you're not, if there's something not being described?
Yeah. He's sending it now.
Okay. I said to you now.
Is the file smaller than 10 megas? No, it's not gonna go through the.
38.
No, it's too big. Kaixing.
Why don't we not hold up for this? I would like to get it, and maybe we can share it with via download link. But in the spirit of not holding up where we are, I think it's fine. I'll jump in if I have questions on something.
We can take a few minutes to share it with you.
Okay, I set you the link because the PowerPoint is too big, so I set you a link you can download from the Google Drive.
Yep, I got it.
Florence, do you want to introduce the members?
Okay. Is it okay? We can start the session. Okay. So, good afternoon or good morning, I think, depending on where you live. It's a pleasure to introduce Kaixing Zhao. We've studied the tactile exploration of graphs using behavioral observation and interaction techniques. We are pleased to welcome 7 members of the examination committee. The PhD manuscript was reviewed by Nicolas Giudice, who is professor at the University of Maine, USA, and by Thiago Guerreiro, professor at University of Lisboa, Portugal. As external member of this jury, we welcome Thomas Pietschak, associate professor at University of Lille in France. The PhD was supervised by Christophe Jouffret, research director at CNRS, and by Marco Serrano, associate professor at University of Toulouse. We welcome a guest, Anke Brock, who is assistant professor at ENAC in France. And finally, I, Florence Barra, associate professor, will be the president of the jury. So, Kaixing, you are going to present your research during around 45 minutes. And then we will continue with the discussion with the jury members. The 2 reviewers, Nicolas Giudice and Thiago Guerreiro, will start the discussion with you. They will have around 20 minutes each to ask you questions. Then Thomas Pietschak will continue. Then I will give myself a chance to speak and to discuss with you. And then Anke Brock. And finally, your 2 supervisors. So we are ready to listen to you, Kaixing. I think we can shut up our microphone.
Just want to make sure that Nicolas, everything is okay with you?
Everything is good. Yep.
Perfect. See you in 45 minutes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Now I will start. Hello, everyone. Today I will present the research works conducted during my PhD. First of all, I would like to thank all the jury members and guests for being here today. My works revolve around the new visual tactile exploration of graphics. In the past 3 years, by working with people with visual impairments, we have focused on the issues during new visual tactile exploration tasks and proposed corresponding novel behavior observations and interaction techniques. For people with visual impairments, exploring graphics with their finger touch is a common way for understanding graphical information. However, such explorations are often accompanied by a series of accessibility issues. For example, although tactile graphics are direct alternative to visual graphics for people with VI, the adaptation and the production difficulties often limit their broader use. In addition, traditional tactile graphics cannot be easily modified or updated, which further reduce their reusability. For digital graphics, accessibility issues are also obvious. The biggest one is that there is often no tactile cues under the fingertip. Therefore, conducting tactile exploration is extremely difficult. In general, my PhD is based on 3 research questions. The first 2 questions correspond to accessibility issues of digital and tactile graphics, while the third one focuses on the difficulties of graphic-based learning and teaching for purposes with visual impairments during the pandemic. Next, I will present our 3 contributions separately. In each part, I will first briefly introduce the related works and then present our research works. Our first contribution corresponds to the research question, can we augment humans' tactile exploration ability? This contribution is called WebHand, which is an on-head visual tactile interface aiming to enhance new visual exploration of digital graphics. In 30 years, exploring digital graphics has become more and more common for people with VR. The interactivity and updatability of digital graphics makes them more flexible than tactile graphics. But as I presented before, digital graphics have their own accessibility issues, for example, the lack of tactile cues. However, not all digital graphics systems cannot provide touch sensation. These three fingers show examples of hybrid devices supporting digital graphics exploration. As we can see, they include both physical and digital components and can easily provide users with touch sensation. But the use of hybrid devices is still rare due to the limited number of physical objects they can accommodate. Another type of device is digital-only devices. As we can see from these fingers, they do not include any additional physical components, and the graphical information are completely digital. In this case, the lack of tactile cues under the fingertip during tactile exploration becomes the biggest difficulty for people with VR. To tackle this difficulty, our first contribution was proposed. Our aim was to augment humans' tactile exploration ability of digital graphics. This contribution was based on two research questions: how to design a vibro-tactile interface and corresponding tactile cues, and can people with VR use them without introducing additional cognitive issues? More precisely, in this work, instead of exploring tactile graphics directly as shown in finger A, or explore with simple tablet vibration as shown in finger B, we investigated how to composite tactile cues under the fingertip by vibrations on the back of the hand, as illustrated in finger C. We have investigated two types of tactile cues: a pre-cue providing segment direction, and a confirmation cue about the exploration progression. As we can see in figure D, we actuate one vibrator to indicate the top right direction and two vibrators at the same time to indicate the right direction. In figure E, a long strong vibration followed by a long light vibration indicate 40% and 80% of exploration progression respectively. In this contribution, we leveraged a participatory design method involving both participants with VR and blindfolded sighted participants. Before designing specific vibro-tactile factors, we first analyzed the overall idea of vibro-tactile interface on the back of hand. We proposed to combine a regular tablet for displaying digital graphics with a vibro-tactile interface on the back of hand. The main reason of leveraging the back of hand relies on the cognitive process involved in hand guidance. If the tactile cues are applied on any other body parts, the user must mentally switch from the sensory reference frame, that means the location of the tactile display, to the motor reference frame used for executing hand movements. In addition, although palms are more sensitive than the back of hand, they often have contact with the surface during tactile acceleration. Therefore, palms are not suitable for placing vibrators. We also analyzed the number of vibrators. Considering the limited space on the back of hand, we proposed to use the 4 vibrators to represent 8 cardinal directions, instead of using too many vibrators as shown in finger on the left. Based on the idea of 4 vibrators, 2 vibro-tactile stimulation methods can be used to represent 8 directions. SVP is based on sets of sequential or simultaneous vibrations applied to different vibrators. ATM is a tactile illusion that occurs when 2 or more vibrators are activated with a predefined delay on the skin. We compared their performances in our participatory design. By having previous analysis, we conducted a participatory design with both people with VR and sighted people. First, to make sure the vibro-tactile cues are compatible with digital graphics exploration task, participants proposed that the duration of the cues should be as short as possible, but need to be unambiguously perceivable. In addition, after discussing with participants, 2 layout shapes of the vibro-tactile interface on the back of hand were proposed: square layout and cross layout. This table shows how to represent each direction using different stimulation methods and with different layout shapes. During our participatory design, participants also proposed 4 configurations of layout position on the backward hand. The main difference between them is whether the fingers are included. For example, as shown in this figure, in configuration A, 4 vibrators follow square layout and are all on the backward hand. But in configuration D, 4 vibrators follow cross layout, and 2 of the vibrators are on 2 different fingers. In addition to directional cues, we also desired progression cues, which are used for indicating the exploration progression of each segment. We first chose 500 milliseconds as the duration of progression cues. Then we proposed to use 2 or 4 vibrations to indicate different progressions. We also proposed 2 different intensity modes, increasing or decreasing intensity. In our design, the direction cues are triggered as soon as the fingertip touches the segment on the graphic. As for the progression cues, they appear at several fixed points of the segments. In terms of digital graphics on tablet, we compared 2 different digital line widths, 8.9 mm and 4 mm during the participatory design. Finally, we found that 4 mm is more compatible with complex and meaningful digital graphics displayed on commercial tablets. Study of Palani also verified that participants with VI can explore 4 mm digital graphics without perceptual issues. To ensure that the desired vibratile direction cues are effective, we conducted a pilot study to investigate the relationship between the duration of vibrations and the recognition rates of direction cues. Among 4 proposed vibratile configurations, we selected only configuration A and C to reduce the study duration. We compared 5 different vibratile durations from 50 to 300 milliseconds. The figure on the left shows our setup for this pilot study with the configuration C. From this figure, we can find that the recognition rates reach a plateau from the duration of 200 milliseconds. We therefore chose this value as the duration of vibratile direction cues. We then conducted a formative study to determine the optimal stimulation method, SVP or ATM, and the best configuration of the vibratile interface. The figure on the right shows the recognition rates of direction cues under different configurations and with different stimulation methods. The blue bars represent SVP stimulation method, while the gray bars represent the ATM stimulation method. From the Friedman and the post hoc test, we found that SVP is always significantly better than ATM, and with configuration C, participants had better recognition rates. As for the vibratile progression cues, based on another pilot study with 4 blindfolded participants, we confirmed that 2 progression cues with decreasing intensity were preferred by participants. We therefore chose this method for our formal study. We evaluated our design by conducting a behavioral experiment. The aim of this study was to verify the hypothesis that the 2 cues rendered by the vibratile interface can enhance digital graphics exploration without introducing additional perceptual or cognitive issues. We recruited 12 participants with VI and 12 blindfolded sighted participants. We designed 2 different types of digital graphics, simple geometrical graphics as shown in set A and B, and non-figurative graphics as shown in set C and D. The non-figurative graphics are 2D patterns made from a combination of 6 segments. Contrary to geometrical graphics, they do not represent a figurative shape, and hence, their identification does not depend on any existing representation. We use the delete matching to sample task in our experiment. In each trial, we ask the participant to explore a sample graphic and then an alternative graphic after a 5 seconds delay. They had to judge if the 2 graphics are identical or different. When compared 2 interaction techniques, The control condition based on the technique proposed by Tech Lee and Webhand. Here, the control technique means that only tablet vibration is provided while exploring digital graphics. The experiment included 2 phases for getting familiar with the vibro-tactile cues and the interaction techniques respectively. After familiarization, the participants were presented with 2 blocks of trials, the first one with the geometrical graphics, and the second one with the non-figurative graphics. The interaction techniques were counterbalanced across participants. We collected data from 384 trials, and for each trial, we measured the identification accuracy after exploring the first graphic, the comparison accuracy, and the response time after exploring the second graphic. Finally, we measured the unrelated finger paths and the exploration speed across all graphics. These 2 figures show the identification and comparison accuracies of graphics. The vertical axis of these 2 figures represent the corresponding accuracy. For the identification of geometrical graphics, the results show a significant effect of the interaction technique. Identification accuracies are always higher with Webhand, but no effect of the various data. For the pair comparison, results show a significant effect of the interaction technique too. Comparison accuracy are always higher with Webhand, but there is no effect of the various data nor the graphic type. The response time is the time needed to answer if the second graphic is same or different. In this figure, the vertical axis represents the average response time in seconds. As we can see, the response time is shorter with Webhand. The ANOVA shows that there is an effect of interaction technique and the graphic type on the response time, but no effect of the various data. The unrelated figure path is the difference between the exploration path and the graphic length. In this figure, the vertical axis represents the finger path in centimeter. As we can see here, the unrelated figure path is much shorter with Webhand. The ANOVA shows that there is an effect of the interaction technique, but also of the various data on the unrelated figure path, but no effect of the graphic type. We observed the exploration movements that were made with the 2 techniques to understand more about the results. The figure C and D show that the exploration with Webhand presented more linear figure paths and more efficient transitions at the end of the segments. Finally, we compared the exploration speeds. In these 3 figures, the vertical axis represents the exploration speed in centimeter per second. The first figure shows that participants with VR explore significantly faster than blindfolded participants. The second figure shows that Webhand significantly improves the exploration speed. The third figure shows that participants explore faster than non-figurative graphics. In summary, our experiment confirmed our hypothesis that Webhand can improve non-visual digital graphics exploration from different aspects. However, we did not observe any effect of various data on the identification of no graphics nor on the comparison of graphics. More generally, the performance of the proposed Webhand meets our initial expectations. Webhand improves the graphics identification and the comparison, augments the exploration speed, and reduces unrelated figure paths. However, Webhand supports only 8 basic directions. Similar to commonly used tactile graphics, the use of Webhand should also be based on simplified graphical information. Therefore, more studies are needed to support more than 8 directions. In addition, more evaluations need to be conducted to formally evaluate cognitive load while using Webhand. Our second contribution corresponds to the research question: Can we understand the tactile exploration at a more refined level? This contribution is called tactile fixation, which is a behavioral marker on how people with visual impairments explore read-like graphics. For people with VR, being able to access graphical information is important for improving their inclusion into the society. Among different types of graphics, tactile graphics rely on relief and enable people with VR to explore graphical information with their finger touch. For example, the finger on the right shows a child with VR is learning geographical knowledge by exploring a tactile map. Generally, tactile graphics can be divided into two categories: contour-independent and contour-based graphics. Their principal difference is whether the focus are graphical elements or other information contained in different points or areas of the graphic. When exploring contour-independent graphics, generally we do not need to carefully track the tactile lines and focus more on the data they contain. In contrast, as shown in the thing on the right, the exploration of contour-based graphics relies not only on kinesthetic views, but also accurate tactile perception of lines of the graphics. In fact, no matter what type of tactile graphics, tactile exploration is very important for different tasks. In the field of psychology and HCI, one of the objectives of tactile exploration is to conduct graphics recognition or identification. These tasks are generally based on common graphics or specifically designed 2D patterns. However, it does show that there exist disagreements in previous studies, and most of the identification rates are still too low. Previous studies have also observed several exploration strategies during non-visual exploration of tactile graphics. They can be summarized as 4 different types: grid, cyclic, parameter, cyclic, and reference point strategy. These strategies are important for better understanding how people with VR transform hand movements to abstract graphical information. Overall, previous studies showed that non-visual exploration of tactile graphics is important. However, such explorations are not easy, but a good tactile design may greatly facilitate the tactile exploration. Therefore, in this contribution, we aimed to improve the design of read-like graphics by understanding how people with VR explore them at a more refined level. That means how they organize their hand movements. This knowledge may inform a better design guideline and may also improve the design of interactive graphics. In eye tracking research, eye fixation occurs when people's eyes stop scanning about the scene and hold the central vision in place. Similar to eye movements, tactile exploration with hands is also one of the most important ways to get information for people with VR. However, there are still several differences. For example, hands do not always jump from one element to another one and are more independent. Inspired by eye fixations, we propose the definition of tactile fixation. So tactile fixation is a finger behavior that occurs when the finger is stationary within a specific spatial and temporal window. Based on the definition of tactile fixation, in this work, we studied several research questions. For example, how to identify tactile fixations. Do tactile fixations vary according to hand, graphic type, and exploration task? Finally, we investigated if we can relate tactile fixation to exploration pattern. To do this, we conducted a behavioral experiment. This figure shows the setup of our study. We leveraged the camera to record the hand movements, and the 2 index fingers of participants were painted for further tracking. The experiment involved 10 people with VI. Their demographical information is shown here. As we can see, all the 10 participants are right-handed. We introduced 5 different types of read-like graphics, including 2D drawings, drawings with perspective, mathematical graphs, geographic maps, and neighborhood building maps in our experiment. They can represent the most commonly used read-like graphics for people with VI. We designed 3 different types of tasks in our experiment. These three tasks are both very common during tactile graphics exploration and can represent tasks of different difficulties. By comparing results of tactile fixations under different tasks, we can have a better understanding about the effect of tasks. Actually, compared with exploration with context enables participants to know the type of graphic before exploration. Purposeful exploration provides further instruction related to the graphical elements. In our study, we measured the number, duration of tactile fixations, and then observed the exploration patterns based on tactile fixations. Now we can see the results of tactile fixation identification. When the dispersion and duration value of our identification algorithm was set to 50 pixels and 500 milliseconds, we can get the finger on the right. We can know that duration of identified tactile fixations are between 500 milliseconds and 48 seconds, and the relationship between number of tactile fixations and durations follows log normal distribution. The duration peak is between 550 and 600 milliseconds. In these two figures, the vertical axis represents the average number of tactile fixations. We can see that between two hands and between different types of graphics, there exist significant differences. More precisely, the left hand performs more tactile fixations than the right hand, while 2D drawings have much less tactile fixations than other types of graphics. This figure presents the interaction between task and graphic type. The vertical axis represents the number of tactile fixations. From this figure, we can find that there are significant differences in purpose tasks, but not in free and context tasks. The vertical axis in these three figures represents the average duration of tactile fixations in milliseconds. From these figures, we can find significant differences between two hands, 5 different graph types, and 3 tasks. More precisely, the average duration of tactile fixations on right hand is longer than left hand. They are also longer in geographic maps, mathematical graphs, and neighborhood building maps. We can also see that the average duration of tactile fixations in purpose task is much longer than the other 2 tasks. Finally, this figure presents the interaction between task and graphic type. The vertical axis represents the average duration of tactile fixations in milliseconds. We can find that differences between graphic types are only true in purpose task, but we didn't find such differences in free and context tasks. In our study, we also investigated the role of tactile fixations during the exploration of grid-like graphics. We identified 3 exploration patterns based on tactile fixations from 296 exploration videos. We divide them as anchor points, switching fingers, and chaining hands. First, the anchor point. The right hand stays at the anchor while the left hand performs several tactile fixations. You can see my demo here. Now, it's an example of switching fingers. The 2 hands are used alternatively as the anchor point in this pattern. Finally, the chaining hands pattern. In this pattern, one hand always follows the tactile fixations of another hand. You can see here. In summary, the results show that it is possible to identify tactile fixations in two-handed movement data related to grid-like graphics exploration. The number and the duration of fixations vary according to the hand being used, the type of graphic, and the task being performed. In line with previous observations on exploration strategies, we also observed that both hands are frequently doing stops as well as back and forth movements when exploring a tactile graphic. Actually, these stops are tactile fixations used to build more elaborate cognitive strategies aiming to interpret the graphic. The proposed tactile fixations had many potentials. For example, for special education teachers, they can identify tactile fixations and exploration patterns leading to a better understanding of tactile graphics, and then propose recommendations on how to better perform two-handed exploration of tactile graphics. Tactile document makers can easily observe that some important points of tactile graphics have not been touched, or on the contrary, that the irrelevant points of the graphics are touched many times with long tactile fixations, which may reflect users' confusion. They can then propose guidelines to better design tactile graphics. Interaction designers can design feedback for audio tactile graphics that is coherent with users' behavior. Finally, researchers in psychology and HCM may use this method to better understand the exploration strategies of tactile graphics. Overall, our work verifies that this behavior exists and varies according to different factors. We also verified that tactile fixations can reveal more advanced exploration patterns. But as the first research dedicated to tactile fixation, our work is unavoidably limited and left many open questions. In future works, deeper evaluations are needed to answer these questions and then explore more powerful application scenarios. Now, I will present our third contribution. Our third contribution is called Tactile Link, which is a remote collaborative graphics learning tool for purpose with visual impairments. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, teaching and learning mode of purpose with visual impairments has been greatly changed. Remote collaborative learning and teaching has become more and more frequent. Actually, previous studies show that collaborations, especially collaborative learning between people with VI or VI-sighted groups, are not rare, such as the two examples we present here. As we can see in the finger on the left, it's an interactive tool for enabling collaborative programming learning, and while the figures on the right represent a collaborative handwriting learning tool. However, previous studies have their limitations. For example, for both tactile graphics or digital graphics, their remote explorations have rarely been investigated. Although Mashit has proposed an interactive tool for tangible collaborative distance learning, their research is still in conceptual phase. But the COVID-19 pandemic accelerates the demand in this area. Therefore, remote graphics learning tools are worth studying to ensure the continuity of special education for people with VI. To better understand the situations of remote teaching and learning of purpose with VI, our laboratory conducted an online survey during the pandemic. Based on the feedback from participants, we found that special education teachers modified their teaching mode in this period. For example, they set less paper documents. There were also less interactions between teachers and the purpose with VI during the remote lectures. Special education teachers mentioned that they need to remotely monitor and work with the purpose with VI using simple tools. However, they also mentioned that current available tools are rare, and they generally use regular tools such as Zoom for maintaining their teaching. In response to the needs of special education professionals, we started this research project. Our contribution was based on these 6 research questions and aimed to co-design an accessible remote graphics learning tool with special education professionals. The whole work was organized at this timeline. For now, we have conducted an online survey and 2 focus groups. We have not yet finished the final design and evaluations. Therefore, we present only the two first focus groups here. To verify the basic idea of remote collaborative graphics learning, we first organized a focus group with 6 professionals. Since the focus group was conducted online, we leveraged several online collaborative tools, such as Concept Board and Extra. This focus group was based on the scenario of global COVID-19 propagation and discussed how to design a tool enabling purpose with VR to explore a graphic similar to the one on the right remotely. To guide the discussion, we first introduced 4 features that we designed for Tactile Link. We asked the participants to comment these features, but they were also free to propose other ideas. More precisely, this finger represents remote tracking feature. When the purpose will explore the map with their finger, there is a touch mark displaying on the teacher's screen at the same time. Therefore, the teacher can track the learning process of remote purpose with VR in real time. The remote control feature enables teacher to activate or inactivate the interactions and feedback remotely. For example, here, the Asia part has been inactivated. So when the purpose will explore this part, they will not receive any feedback from the tool. The annotation feature means that both purpose with VR and teachers can end annotations anywhere they want on the graphic. The ended annotation can be audio vibration. Here we propose the method for ending an annotation. We can use several specific gestures for adding the annotations. The navigation feature means users can change the graphic level, for example, from the world map to Europe map. The whole focus group included 3 parts: introduction, presentation of features, and questions. We asked the participants to discuss pros and cons of Tactile Link and its general use. We also invited them to propose several possible application scenarios based on our tool. After discussing with 6 professionals, we confirmed that the idea of Tactile Link is interesting and should be useful for educational use. However, all the participants mentioned that read-like graphics should be included to reduce the exploration difficulty. In addition, we decided not to include navigation feature in Tactile Link. These participants mentioned that it would be very difficult for purpose with VR to understand level change. Our second focus group had the objective of co-designing potential application scenarios and refining the features. This time, we recruited 4 special education teachers and 2 locomotion instructors. We proposed refined features and collected components of participants using Padlet. In this focus group, the 3 features are real-time visualization of tactile exploration of purpose with VR, activation, deactivation of interactions, and real-time manipulation of contents. Here, the real-time manipulation means we can add, delete, and modify the content of the remote graphic. In this focus group, we followed the idea of participants in previous focus group and decided to include read-like graphics for the proposed Tactile Link. Since there is a mature interactive read-like graphic tool called Diri in our laboratory, we decided to reuse parts of this tool for Tactile Link. Diri is a device with tactile overlay placed over touch screen. The overlay provides tactile cues for finger exploration. The touch screen provides interactivity by adding vocal and sound feedback to points or regions of interest. This figure gives a simple demo about how Diri can be used. As we can see, the read-like map represents bronze and has been ended interactions. When people with VR double-tap the interactive zone on the map, they receive corresponding audio feedback. This focus group lasted 2 hours, and in summary, we got feedback from 4 main aspects. The participants have confirmed that this tool can be useful for purpose with VI. However, they also stressed the need for prerequisite skills or knowledge. They mentioned mandatory skills related to the use of digital tools, as well as knowledge on read-like graphic exploration. All participants agreed that this tool can be useful for multiple subjects and all the professionals in the field of VI. However, the most useful context would be education. All the participants agreed that Tactile Link can improve the inclusion of purpose with VI. They also emphasized that Tactile Link would be an interesting tool for committing parents of the students with VI in the learning process. The participants also raised several potential issues during the focus group. For example, the organization of remote lecture, the efficiency as well as the communication of remote learning, etc. In summary, the co-design of Tactile Link responds to the real needs of purpose VI and professionals. Although this work cannot be completed, the co-design process still provides valuable design information for us. In future works, Tactile Link need to be evaluated in situ environments and explore the possibility of expanding to other learning and teaching areas for people with VI. In conclusion, our research works revolve around 3 axes. The first one is the design of a vibro-tactile interface for augmenting digital graphics exploration. The second one is the definition, implementation, and evaluation of tactile fixation. The proposed tactile fixation has the potential of helping us better understanding the tactile exploration of people with VI. The third one is the design of a remote collaborative graphics learning tool. Although due to time limit, we didn't finish all the implementation and evaluations. The current results of focus groups are still valuable for further similar graphic designs. Actually, we are also considering how to leverage the advantages of each project for proposing a more useful remote graphics learning tool. For example, webhand can be used to provide richer information while using Tactile Link. We can also design special interactions based on the behavior of finger tactile fixations. These interactions may help purpose with VI better interact with their remote teachers. At last, I would like to give some perspectives. Although there exist many works on graphics exploration by people with VI, this domain has still a long way to go. From our point of view, there are at least 2 research directions that are interesting and have potentials. The first one is multimodal. Traditional multimodal studies prefer to combine audio and vibratory feedback to provide richer information. However, multimodal feedback could integrate many other interaction channels. The figure at the top shows the example leveraging multisensory interactions. The inclusion of other modalities, such as sense of smell, is interesting and inspiring. The figure at the bottom reveals another keyword of future research, which is tangible. The use of 3D printed tangible objects on capacitive touchscreens could inspire the design of next-generation Tactile Link. In terms of long-term perspectives, we think that by leveraging inclusive co-design methods in future research works, we may further improve accessibility of interactive tools for people with VI. We believe that future tools supporting graphics exploration should not be limited to specific scenarios or areas, but more like a general tool. Such tools can then help build a more accessible society for people with VI. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kaixing, for your presentation and for keeping time. Now it's time for exchanging views. So we are going to start with Nicolas.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for an excellent presentation and a well-written thesis. Some of my questions are things that I had also written before in my report. I just want a little more clarification on some from your descriptions. And if I'm a little slow in asking, it's because I'm listening to my screen reader and talking, and I am seemingly incapable of listening and talking at the same time. So first, it's just a kind of a practical or question that I've tried to figure out for a long time. In your work on this focus on graphical access, have you come up with any idea of the prevalence of graphical content? This is something that, as I said, is I've just been trying to figure this out in terms of, when you look at textbooks, when you look at use of graphics in daily life, they are obviously increasingly important and used because they're easy to render than back when everything was done with needing to be typeset and what have you. But yeah, I'm just curious. Do you have any idea of numbers or percentages of this?
Number for me, the number of vibrators, the web hand.
No. I mean just in terms of graphical content. So, like, what percentage of content that we consume is graphical?
Yeah. I know this question because in my thesis I said there are a lot of graphical information, but the tactile graphics are rare, actually. But in fact, according to our observations, tactile graphics are generally appeared in the special education centers and some of the special education. But for people with visual impairments, they generally do not have access to this type of graphics in daily life, in the working life. So I think that's why we said the tactile graphics are still rare, but we didn't find an exact number of how many tactile graphics among the graphical information. We didn't have an exact number of this. But
and what I mean is not tactile graphics are rare, and you don't need to have an answer for this because I don't have one either. I'm more asking, what is the prevalence, the amount of information in general that sighted people consume that is graphical? Because that's the starting point, right? Then we say, okay, this is a huge amount of information. Then how do we make that accessible? Tactile graphics are a tiny percentage of that. I agree. Anyway, I'll move on to more relevant questions. So I like the VibHand idea, and it's something that I know I asked about a bunch as well. And you did some studies. So my initial complaint or concern was, well, you're using the back of the hand. That makes sense from an engineering standpoint. It's an easier surface. It doesn't interfere with when you're touching. It's easier to mount. I liked your logic of saying you're matching it, the stimulation to the effector that's being used. So you don't have a frame of reference problem, which I think is a real issue. Smart thing to think about. But perceptually, and you did studies that were compelling, looking at the finger to the back of the hand. But I still, from a perceptual standpoint, the fingers, pads, have way higher resolution. Yeah. It's kind of roughly analogous to saying, hey, let's give people some high resolution task in the visual field and stick it outside of the fovea. Where you're like, well, that seems silly because that's not where your cones are. So I guess my question is, do you have any data more on the physiological data of, looking at skin sensitivity? There's lots of maps out there of receptor densities. What is the relation of the receptor density and resolution, tactile resolution on the back of the hand versus the fingers?
Actually, this is a very interesting question. After reading your report, I tried to find the answer of this question. In fact, as we all agree that the pad, the palm is more sensitive than the back of the hand, and also according to some papers in medical science, they said that the fingers are also more sensitive than the back of the hand. but compared to the forearm, the backhand almost have the similar resolution as the forearm. But here, as we said, as I presented before, we didn't use the palm, the hand as the surface because during the tactile fixation, they contact with the surface, and this will cause problems. So we consider consider only the backhand, but in our design, we also compared the differences between the backhand only or the combination of the finger and the backhand, and finally we found that the combination of finger hand and the combination of finger and the backhand are more effective than the backhand only. So that's why we decided to use this surface as for the web hand.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I thought it was a good comparison. I mean, it made me, from my initial read, I'm like, oh, this is like a traditional engineering mistake, in my opinion. And then I read, and I was happy that you did the comparison, and I was convinced by the data. I guess I was just interested in if you actually had come up with any resolution thresholds, just in terms of kind of psychophysical stuff that wasn't part of your thesis, but it had been done in the past, just to show the difference between the back of the hand and the fingers. But I was convinced by the work that you showed that this can work well. But I do have another question. So I also like the work looking at the positioning and shape of the vibrators and how you had them on there for stimulation. But even with what you found for the optimal positioning, you have 4 stimulators, correct?
Yeah.
And what can you imagine a way that could be improved in terms of signal intensity, or using different signals to get more resolution? Because if you think of just making everything out of 4 points, graphical content, which can have many vertices and many points, and it can be difficult to simulate things based on this arrangement. Is there any way that you could imagine, even though you didn't study it, in increasing the resolution of the stimulation site?
Yeah. Actually, that's true. But in our study, we just compared the cross and the square layout, and also we make sure that the distance between vibrators should fall compatible with the resolution of the backhand, so that we can distinguish the 2 vibrators. If not, we cannot distinguish the vibrations.
Yeah, and I was happy to hear. I noticed that you initially used the 8.9 millimeter spacing, which is stuff that we had worked on, and then also went down to 4. And I was happy to hear that worked, even with this new way of presenting. Because we did this with vibrotactile stimulation using piezoelectric vibration motors from a phone on the fingertip. So I was kind of happy to hear that it seemed to be similar.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little bit in your? I had a question before, and I still have it. In just you ran both sighted and blind participants, depending on what you were running, which I don't have a problem with. I know some people have a huge issue with that, and I think that's partly low-hanging fruit for people to complain about. There's certain things where I think there are differences, potentially. I guess that's what I'm curious. In certain things where I don't think it matters. But in your studies, what do you think may have been different about running sighted participants versus blind participants?
Yeah, this question, I'm sure it's a question that everyone will ask. So, in fact, we included the blindfolded participants. This is just because 2 reasons. For example, the first one is we would like to reduce the participatory design, because the difficulties of the participatory design, because if we do recruit all the blind participants for all the design process, it will be very difficult. And second, we would like to know if there are differences between the identification and the comparison occurs between blindfolded and sighted participants, and so this is two reasons. That's why we include the blindfolded sighted participants. But actually, we also reference one of your paper in 2020 because in your paper you said that in some simple tasks or low cognitive tasks, for example, follow a simple line on the tablet, there are no difference between the blind sighted participants and people with visual impairments. So after verify this hypothesis with your paper, that we decided to include some blindfolded participants to reduce the difficulty. So that's why we recruited both people with visual impairments and blindfolded sighted participants.
But if I'm wearing, we've all done reviewing of papers, and Diego can speak to this the most, from an editorial standpoint. But when you hear this kind of an excuse, people say, and I'm not giving you a hard time as much, just pushing a little bit, because this is what I've experienced quite a bit. People say, well, it's not valid to say it's hard to get blind participants, even though that's obviously true. But from an experimental standpoint, that's not a rationale. So, like, what in your head would potentially be the difference? Or what do you think could be the difference between running these two populations and potentially using data from one to speak to the other?
For me, I'm not sure it's correct or not, but I think for some very simple tasks, for example, here we just follow one single line on tablet. I don't think there's much difference on perceptual in terms of perception for people with visual impairments and sighted people. But for some high cognitive tasks, for example, when you explore very, very, very difficult, complex stage graphics, it's sure we cannot recruit sighted people to replace the people with visual impairments. So here in our study, we just included some people with sighted people for some very simple tasks, and they are not in for our formative study. So we don't think it would be their difference for our study actually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually have a problem with it at all here. I was just curious on your view of when you would or wouldn't do such a thing. Let's move on to some questions I have on the tactile fixation stuff, which I really liked, kind of, and appreciate your thinking here and kind of the concept of it. But I still have some questions. So, hold on, let's look at reading my. Okay, so you're looking at these fixations, and correct me here if I'm wrong, and you're kind of saying, well, when you have areas, certain stereotypic actions or behaviors, that's a marker of focus, for instance. So if someone is not moving a lot in their fixating, or they're focusing on an area that is an area, a region of interest, or a region that's being concentrated on. But how do you distinguish that movement cessation from other types of other activities that could cause seemingly the same behaviors that seem confounded? So, I mean, what happens if I'm just suddenly daydreaming, or I zone out, or there could be lots of reasons why it seems like I could have a very similar pattern of motion and not motion, independent of my focus.
Yeah, thank you for this question. And in fact, I would also want to explain this question more clearly, because tactile fixations that we proposed, in fact, they are not completely static. But that means there are some macro movements on the finger, like the second of the eye movements. So if the finger is totally static, the people with visual impairments cannot get the information actually. So they are as long as the duration dispersion of the finger movements meet our predefined condition, and we can define them as a tactile fixation. So they are not completely static. It's just a micro movements, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of was thinking about. So from remembering from what you were saying, part of the thresholding was based on, say, not having. I think one of the movements was like there was movement not within, or that was under 14 millimeters or something like that. It was some value that you determined. And my feeling was that was for gross movement, but you weren't looking at the very small, fine lateral movements that you get from normal touch. So, like if someone may be not moving with their gross movement is not moving their fingers, but their fingers moving a little bit in these little micro movements, then that's showing they are still being focused. They wouldn't get that if they were zoning out. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought so. I didn't think that was totally clear from how you explained it, but I think that explanation makes a lot of sense. And I think it would be interesting to. I mean, I wonder if there are other markers. Like, I mean, I think eye movement would obviously be a bad one, but something like that. Like, are there other concentration, like expressions or things that would tie to that? Because I think about when I'm trying to extract something textually, I feel a different tension almost in my. I try to almost lock my arm. Like I have these very small movements of my finger, but I just maybe start thinking about how you would dig more into these fixations and how that ties to locus of attention, what have you. I think it's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question I had on this. So I don't think you mentioned this in the talk today, but I think it was in the your write up. So in relation to tactile fixations, you were looking at this using traditional pressure-based haptic stimuli, correctly? Embossed stimuli?
Sorry, can you repeat?
So I think you were looking at it using embossed stimuli, like not vibrotactile. You were looking at this using like more traditional tactile stimuli.
Yeah.
Is it so? What's the relation? Do you think there'd be any difference or any relation in terms of movements and these fixations using, say, the Vib hand or other vibrotactile stimuli?
Actually, for now we just tested the tactile fixation on tactile graphics, but
right.
But it's sure it can be applied to any other graphics. For example, the digital graphics used for web hand. But it's as I said before, it's more like an open question because we didn't test this with the digital graphics.
But I'm asking you to surmise, because you are using somewhat different receptors, right? So you're using regular traditional mechanoreceptors for pressure-based graphics versus the vibrotactile stimulation. It's on a different part of the hand. I mean, so do you think it would be the same? Is there any reason to think you wouldn't show similar results?
Actually, I think there would be some small differences, but in general, the idea of tactile fixations, I think, is the same. I think we can also detect the similar tactile fixation while using web hand. Just maybe the final results in terms of the duration and number may be different, but the general idea is the same. And I think it must be tested with the digital graphics with, for example, web hand. So if we can get the similar results, that means our definition tactile fixation is perfect. It can be applied to any other graphics.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm running out of time. A couple of last final questions. So the tactile link stuff I liked. I think it's really important. I think it's very important. There's not enough people looking at collaborative learning and remote learning. These are such a big part of the pedagogical process at this point, and how people are just doing stuff, right, and communicating. And it's from an accessibility standpoint, especially remote graphics. through touch, it's almost non-existent. You didn't get as far as with that as you kind of hoped, and I understand. I think the amount of work that you got done during the pandemic was impressive. But where do you see this going? Where do you see it being extended and continuing? And is this, you mentioned this at the end, that this is something you're interested in doing, but how do you see that happening?
Actually, we all of our results are from the direct feedback from the participants, professionals during our feedback or our survey. So we have, I do think we the tactile link, the prototype can be used without any other problems. It should be tested, but
you don't have user evaluations yet.
Yeah, but we have user. Tactile user is, for example, one group of special education teacher plus with a purpose viewer. So it's a group of each tactile user will be a group, a teacher with a purpose in distance. So for now, we just collected feedback from the special education teachers, but we didn't. We haven't discussed with the purpose. So we will continue to contact with the purpose to have their ideas. So the final design, I think it should be a combination from the feedback from education teachers and the purpose. So for now, it's not complete.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see it actually get implemented into a curriculum. I can imagine lots of interesting studies with that. And I'd be interested in talking with you more if you are continuing with that. But yeah, thank you. I won't take any more time. I appreciate you did a lot of hard work here, and it was very evident in your write-up and your presentation. So,
yes,
good job.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, so I guess it's me.
It's you, Thiago. Okay.
Thank you. So good afternoon, and thank you, Kaixing, for the presentation, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. There are a lot of things that Nicola already discussed, so I'll try to go and find the spots that I still want a little bit more from you. Overall, I want to say that I really liked reading the thesis, and so it's already written in my report, but I think it has a lot of different contributions that I find valuable. It presents from a robust background, some formative user studies, understanding of how people use tactile graphics to novel interfaces that could improve how graphics are explored. So I think my main question, and one of the things that I find in the thesis, and I'll start right away with the thesis statement. So you have your thesis statement saying, I did these things. And that's not really a thesis statement, right? The thesis statement is you showing, I'm showing this evidence, or I'm proving, or different people like different words, but can you summarize what is your thesis statement in a shorter way, and not so much about the studies that you did, but what you think you have accomplished with your thesis?
Yeah, actually, I reviewed my thesis statement, and yeah, sure, it's too simple, I think. And for me, in one sentence, I think my thesis statement is tackle the difficulties of tactile exploration of digital and tactile graphics. It's one of the most important things for me. And in addition to this, I conducted some works for the remote graphics learning, but the main focus is to help people with visual impairments to better explore digital graphics and tactile graphics. So I think this is the main idea for me.
Okay, so yes, and I think it's fair. So Looking at the rest of the thesis and the way, well, I read it. I don't know what you have changed until now. But it also feels like you have like these three different things, which are not different. They have like this anchor. But I was left wondering when reading the thesis that actually they could be connected in many ways. I was thinking that while you are presenting tactile fixations, actually the way people explore a graphic could be used somehow to improve the way the feedback is provided with VibHand. So do you find this, like there's a line connecting these three, and what opportunities do you see for your three major components or contributions to be used together?
Yeah, actually, for me, I presented my three contributions follows the order of VibHand, tactile fixation, and tactile link. But I think perhaps this is because this is what I did during my PhD. But I think for me, tactile fixation is the prerequisite research for all of my PhD, because first I'd like to know how people explore tactile graphics, and then I proposed the definition of tactile fixation, and then based on the results of tactile fixation, I think we can use VibHand to augment digital graphics exploration, and during the exploration, some of the maybe we can discover some tactile fixations, and then we can use these tactile fixations to design specific interactions with the digital graphics. It would be more logic and more. I think the whole PhD will be more powerful, the contributions. And so although for now the three contributions are separate because they focus the tactile digital graphics and the remote graphics learning, but we are considering to combine the advantage of the three contributions, and we can use the VibHand to augment the remote graphics learning by providing richer information, and we can also use the results of tactile fixation to design specific interactions, feedbacks for people for purpose with VI or for special education teachers. So it's sure there will have a link between these three contributions, but due to time limit, we didn't conduct such a project combining these three contributions.
Yes, and I think that's okay. I think they are connected, but in the thesis they read as somewhat disconnected. But I think there are obviously they feed into each other in a good way. So I'll jump to some questions that I think are a little bit more high level, but also a little bit provocative and controversial eventually. So I tell my students when they are writing paper or a report, there's also always this appeal to put charts on there just because they have a lot of charts and they put charts there. And I also always tell them that it's nice to have a chart there if it tells me something quicker, if I can get an overview of what would be a big chunk of text. So it's good to call the attention to something. And so my question here in high level is that it seems to me that there's always this attempt to pick up a chart there's in a document and make it a tactile graphic. For example, a chart. Is there benefits in most of the cases? Do you think there is a benefit, or we should explore different ways to convey the data, that same data, instead of trying to stick with the same type of medium to convey a piece of information? Because a graphic is a piece of information; it can be conveyed in different ways. And so my question here is that does it make sense in most of the cases, or it should be something else? Which I'm not saying it's text. It's eventually a different chart or a different kind of thing. Maybe there's a lot of more translation or to do here. So Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think I wrote some opinions in my thesis, but not a lot, because I think for graphical information, it's true. It's sure the graphical information is very important for both sighted people and people with visual impairments. And but for people with visual impairments, for example, when we describe some object or the scenery, when we can describe with the words, and we don't need to use the graphic to describe something. So in this case, for me, I think we do not need to transcribe all the information to graphics. So when we need to use the graphics for people with impairments, for example, some specific abstract conceptions, and also like the maps, it's very important to use the graphics, not just the word description. So in this case, there is an advantage of using graphics to help people with VI to understand the information. So it depends on the type of content and also the difficulties of transcription and other factors. I think it's a comprehensive decision to make when we meet when we decide if we need to transcribe to graphics. So it's one of my opinion, but I think for some abstract conceptions, information, there should be more. There should be graphical. It would be much easier to understand for me.
Yeah, let me push you a little bit more. So we have written text, and we have the shape of the words, but then we have Braille, for example. It tries to convey the same information. It's the letter A, B, C, but it changed the way that letter is communicated to a way that is more easier to explore with your fingers, with your fingertips. And so my question here is that if we are not missing a step here in the translation, because it may be that understanding some of these contents is not really just the tactile representation of the same chart, but it could be a different representation or different layers or different parts of the chart. So that's, for example, when you're having FibHand, you have the opportunity to change a little bit how the tactile graphics is created, or even how it is communicated to the person that is exploring.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, but I think we did have a lot of we didn't think about more about that. So the initial idea is just want to improve the graphics exploration with whatever the type of tactile or digital. We just want to improve the tactile exploration. So I think we didn't have very much to think about this point before, but it's interesting, I think.
Okay, yep, I think that's. I was just trying to push a little bit and get some discussion. There's a part in your thesis where you go and explore, and you say that you should explore tactile because audio so it's cognitively demanding, and somehow this sense is already stressed to the limit. And I was left wondering which one has more capacity, and I think you can answer me that. So if you feel that people are have less cognitive demand by exploring with their hands compared with getting audio information. But the second question is, why not exploring? And today you showed this a little bit with the future looking to multimodality, using audio to somehow give an extra layer that could decrease cognitive load instead of increase it. So Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, the exploring the digital graphics with audio feedback, it has been verified before. Yeah, it works, and then for us, we just included the vibration as a feedback for during the digital graphic exploration, and after our experiment, we verified that the only vibration with on the back of hand plus tablet vibration, we can help us to explore digital graphics. So based on the results, actual results, when we include additional audio feedback, for example, the sound, the other types of audio feedbacks, it's sure we can further improve the digital graphics exploration. So it's more like a multimodal feedback, multimodal device, and we can use such a multimodal device in some specific areas. For example, in my thesis, I presented that during the class, it would be very noisy. All students use the audio feedback. So, but at home, for example, when I use the webcam at home, I can add another layer, the audio feedback, to augment my tactile exploration. And we observe that by using only the vibration, it's very difficult during the tactile digital graphics exploration. And plus the webcam, we can reduce the difficulties. And then when we include further the audio feedback, it would be much easier for the digital graphic exploration. And the performance of including additional audio feedback should be tested. We did not test, but we think that would be much easier for people with visual impairments. So it's a future work for us. It should be tested.
Okay, I'll just go back to. I'm jumping back and forth, but I think right in the beginning you talk about blind people and people with low vision. I think we have in the accessibility community, we have been jumping around between terms, and sometimes the terminology is not very clear. So when I read about blind and low vision, for me, this in some contexts, the things that we are talking about in the assistive technologies or the technologies that we are exploring may be totally different. In some cases, they can be very similar. So sometimes we use the term visually impaired more globally. Sometimes we use screen reader users when we want to detail a little bit more the type of functional experiences of our participants. But when you talk about blind and low vision, I think of low vision as people that eventually would explore the graphic in a different way, and not with the fingertips, but eventually with a magnifier, and this can be a bit stereotypical, but it's not clear to me when you present your population that a person with low vision would also be the user of feedback. And so I also, these were my doubts, but I also then started thinking if you had considered the abilities and eventual needs of these groups separately, or are you talking about just screen reader users and
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's very interesting. In fact, in my thesis, I use always the term people with visual impairments, but among these three contributions, for example, web hand, we recruited all the participants are blind, in fact, but for the but this is for our formal study of web hand. But during our participatory design, we recruited sometimes the people with low vision. But for the contribution tactile fixation, the 10 participants are all blind, and so in the whole thesis, sometimes we recruited the low vision people with low vision. Sometimes we recruited blind people, and to have a more how to say how to better present our contributions, we use the uniform term people with visual impairments because it includes both blind people and people with low vision, and we think that people with different vision degrees can all be called people with visual impairments. So we decided to use this term in my thesis. And for now, we didn't separately compare their performance because for our formal studies, we always recruited blind people, not people with low vision.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about the different terminologies because I think that sometimes we used people with visual impairments broadly and don't define, and this somehow it becomes a little bit gray what the population that we are targeting. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's something broader, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's targeted as a specific group, but we still talk about people with visual impairments, and I'm not sure if that is helpful then to those that are reading. So I think that in some cases you could specify the who you think are the users of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes the term is confusing to the reviewers and to the reader.
Okay, so I dedicated some time in some space in my report to talk about another thing that was already discussed, and I wanted to reinforce. And I shared the opinions that were shared before. So I think that there is a trend to when you see the word blindfolded, for people to say, and this is a defense. This is a defense mechanism for a community that has seen this used wrongly several times. For people to say, no, blindfolded is not represented. And in a way, I understand this, and this is a pushback, and it also needs to be understood like that. In some cases, it's also needed for real representative users to be used. And I'll explain this. So I work with the institutions here in Portugal, and sometimes my students go there to design, to co-design or to experiment with some of these technologies. And there were cases in the past, and I don't feel proud of this, that I've talked with the person that I always talk there. It's a psychologist that is also blind, and he told me, "Well, Tiago, this last thing that you brought here, it was not very good. So, but I think you guys would have found that just testing yourself." And this for me was like, well, yeah, well, what are we doing? We are just bringing stuff because we want to do it with the target user, but then we are wasting people's time. And so obviously, when there are a lot of things that you can right away test, anyone can test them. And there are a lot of things that we can test that there's no reason why we should believe that it will be different with any other person. But also, my PhD was on individual differences between people, and particularly visually impaired people. And so there are some cognitive aspects and perceptual aspects that vary a lot between or among people with visual impairments and between people with visual impairments and other people, because it's a matter of training, of adaptation. And when we talk, for example, about tactile perception, I believe that there are differences that need to be considered. And so this doesn't mean that you can't really test this with someone that is sighted. It does, but it does mean that in the end you can say that this will have the same effect on people with visual impairments. And so I think there are some limitations to what you can say, and depending on the context and what you are evaluating. I believe that tactile perception, spatial abilities, for example, orientation, are things that are trained differently and are more diverse in a population of blind people than in the general population. Here in Portugal, I can tell you this story. The level of literacy among blind people is low, but obviously there are a lot of people that are very successful and were able to surpass a lot of challenges. When we go to them and do activities that are related with puzzles, with spatial activities, it is highly divergent. So you have people that were really stimulated in learning about that, and there are people that weren't. And for those that weren't, you notice it's a big gap. It's a wide range of abilities that then has an influence in everything that is spatial. And so I think that range of abilities is wider than what you find to the general population, because they are the other kids that we see have somehow training that is more alike. And so that's what I say, that there can be differences. You need to think that they may exist, and so consider them while we are evaluating. This doesn't mean we need to be extreme. It means that we need to consider this and be careful with what the conclusions that we take. Okay, and so but I think that you already spoke about it, so I don't know if you want to say anything regarding this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, during our submission of the paper what hand, we were always fighting back to the reviewers why we included people, blind-folded people, sighted people, and there's a wall in this domain why we included them, in which cases we can include them, in which cases we can't include them. So sometimes it's confusing for me also. So I agree with your opinion about this one. Yeah.
So I think I have one last question, and it's related to tactile link and like these remote activities. And so I think Nicolas also talked about this collaboration in this, and collaboration in education now is very important. So how would you think that this could be used as a way to make people with that are ability diverse, so sighted children and blind children, for example, collaborating in the same tasks with support of your tools? So what are the scenarios and what do you envision regarding tactile graphics that could put people, children, collaborating instead of making them more separated?
Actually, when they collaborate, it's sure there will be some collision or some confusion for purpose with visual impairments. So sometimes for me, these types of collaboration, the most important one is to give the appropriate feedback to children with VI, because first they should have the feedbacks should be in time, so they can perceive the others' movements. Secondly, I think they should have some specific feedbacks, interactions, so that there won't be the conflict with the sighted children. And then when we make sure of these points, we can propose some specific scenarios for the collaboration. They're not all the collaborative activities. These types of collaboration should be limited to some specific scenarios. So this is my point of view. So I think this type of collaboration should be very limited. So but specific for some scenarios, not all the general collaboration.
So I think there are opportunities once you have people collaborating over the internet with different setups to eventually, instead of making these layers of access just specific to children with, that are blind, for example, but to think of other activities that children, for example, can learn together doing something that is tactile, and there are a lot of recognized benefits on using tangibles, not only for children who are blind, but also for everyone. So everyone benefits from touching materials, and it increases learning and acquiring some of these concepts, while it is also improving your dexterity and improving other motor functions. So I think most of the times we are thinking of creating a layer of access, when sometimes we can have the opportunity to really change that educational activity for everyone, while including children with disabilities. So, and I think what you presented and some of these contributions could be thoughts with that frame of mind. So instead of being just for someone that uses tactile graphics, maybe the activity can become a tactile one, and then everyone learns in that way, even with some differences. It becomes broader and more, I think, even better from an educational perspective for everyone. So thank you for today and for your answers.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thomas, if you want to.
Yes. So thank you for inviting me to this committee, and thank you for your work, because I read the document, and it's very interesting, and it looks like it's a lot of work with 3 different studies on 3 different projects that can fit together. So since it's a work about graphics for blind people, I have to say that in the list it says that there are 109 figures in this PhD manuscript, and I'm not sure that I have seen a PhD manuscript with so many figures, so it's a good exercise. So in the previous question, somebody asked you for data about this. So at least you have your manuscript, and you can give data about this. So this was just a side note, but yeah. So maybe my first comment is that at the beginning of the document, I read a definition of the word tactile and the word haptic, and the definition you gave seems to be that tactile is more what is passive feedback, and haptic is more active feedback. And usually the definition that at least I use and I see usually is more tactile is what is felt by the skin, and force feedback is more what is joints, muscles, and articulation, and haptic is something global that includes both tactile and force feedback or kinesthetic.
Okay.
So did you consider a choice at some point, or did you just choose this definition, or did you have a reason for this choice?
In fact, I chose this definition because we have received some reviewers from previous papers, and one of the reviewer specifically told us how to distinguish the tactile, haptic, and other modalities. So after that, I read some papers about this one, and then I chose this definition to present our contributions are more like tactile, not haptic. So that's why I chose this definition.
Okay, because sometimes viewer can make some remarks, but you don't necessarily have to agree with the remarks. They are not always right, or sometimes they can be right, but you can have a different opinion and so on. So don't hesitate sometimes to have your own opinion and stick with your own ideas. But yeah, so usually the definition I use usually it's a paper from Jan Oakley in 2000, and they have many definitions for all the work. But I admit that these are the definitions that I personally use because it fits what I do when I do something with haptics. But I totally understand that it cannot apply to all the work that can be around the haptics, and depending on the point of view and the background of people, they can have different definitions just because they need these words for different purpose. So at least this is good because you gave a definition, so you explain what you mean by these words. And so even if we don't usually use the same words, at least we know exactly what you mean by this. And I think this is important. That's good. So I have a couple of questions which are more, let's say, technical. So when I look at your first project, so the vibe hand, you use some parameters for tactile feedback, but I don't know if you consider some other parameters. I'm thinking especially for encoding distance. You could use, for example, rhythm or other parameters. So did you have a rationale for this kind of choice for tactile parameters?
Actually, all the tactile parameters that we consider I have presented. So for the factors that you just mentioned, I don't think we consider that because sometimes we think that we use the simplest and cheapest vibrators for vibrators, and we can't actually to change many factors, parameters. So we just compare some specific tactile parameters in our study. But perhaps there's some lack of the comparison in terms of the tactile factors. So I'm not sure about that.
Okay, thanks. And also on this study, so what people can explore is basically a path,
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if at some point you consider the case in which you have a crossing on the path, like if you're doing something like this and you cross the path that you were previously. So if you put your finger at the middle of this intersection, what do you feel and what is the information you get?
Yes, it would be more like a future work, because for now we have verified that one single one direction segment we can exploit them, and we can change the directions now. But when we encounter a second cross, it should be some specific strategies. For example, overview of the different directions. We can give the vibrations of different directions, and then the user can choose which direction they will go. Or other strategy, for example, we decided it's the system decided which direction should go, and then we can give the choice of the user to go back to the cross to explore another direction. So it's more like a future work, because we should consider different strategies for this. It's more like a future work.
Yeah, because I worked on this many years ago now, and the strategy I used is that I split the path into segments, and each time I went inside one segment, I was guiding to the next one. So it means that instead of having, let's say, a bitmap and you map, let's say, imagine a color of the pixel or whatever to a directional information, it's more a vector information, and you know exactly where you were before and where you're going, and it means that you basically ignore the other paths, the other segments. So it means that you're always on one segment and not on the other ones. And if you're crossing or not, it doesn't matter actually.
This should be pre-calculated, no?
Yeah. It can be, yeah. Yeah, and especially, so in this case, it means that if with this kind of system, you can only explore paths. So imagine that you would like to explore like a geographical map or something like this. Can it apply to some extent, or so? What do you think about this? If it's something, for example, which is closed and there is no clear beginning or end, or there is no there is no direction which is better than the other one. So is it just a random choice, or how do you adapt this, or can it adapt?
For me, I think it should be related to the specific scenario. For example, if it's a scenario path finding scenario, it should be pre-calculated. So the whole path, and then I give directly for each direction when I encounter cross. So for other scenario, for example, it's the user want to explore all the segments. Then I think I can give the user I can ask them to choose their direction according to their readings. So it's more like depend on different scenarios.
Yeah, and so now I'm thinking that, so I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of direct manipulation. So this is essentially a visual concept, but it can be translated to a haptic as well. And one of the difficult properties of direct manipulation for haptics is that all the objects have to be visible, And this is easy with vision because you can quickly have an overview of the whole scene. But with tactile, it's kind of complicated because you have to actively explore the space, and it's difficult to be sure that you didn't miss something, that you didn't move around something, especially in 2D. So did you explore this kind of aspect of haptic exploration, especially regarding to your third project, or second? I don't remember the number of it.
Actually, we were considered to mark all the visited points. So when we explore when we have explored one point, we should mark them as visited, and then the system could calculate automatically to tell the user you have there still have some points you haven't visited, and you should revisit in which direction, for example, top right, top left, and give them some indications to help them to explore all the points and have an overview of the whole graphic. It should be very useful for them. So it's one of the solutions that we considered.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah. Overall, I think that working on tactile graphics, it's an old problem. I think that most of us in this committee have worked on this for many years, and this is still a big challenge. And I think there is still no good satisfying solutions for this. And at least you're proposing some new techniques and new solutions to these problem, and you explain that you have an idea of how you could combine them to make a whole which is better than just every single part. And so maybe my last question would be like, so you did some individual prototypes and you made evaluation and so on, but if you would like to give this as to end users as a system that they can use to explore graphics, so what do you think are the next technical and scientific steps that are required before you can do this? Let's say a product that you can give to somebody that they can use in daily life, basically.
Yeah, for example, I give the example from based on the web hand. For example, web hand now, the vibrators are attached directly on the back of hand, and we are also there are also some other hardware here on the forearm. So for the end user, this prototype cannot be used directly by end user because it's not compatible with the daily hand movements. So one of the biggest challenges to how to include all the vibrators and include as well the hardware into one product. That means, for example, we can include them all the hardware into glove on the hand. Then when the individual want to use the web hand, they can just take the glove and then they can start the exploration. That would be interesting. So for now, we didn't consider in the engineer part about how to commercialize the prototype. So the final idea is to make a glove that includes all the vibrators and other hardwares into one glove. So when we want to use two web hand, we can take two gloves directly and before the exploration. So this is our idea.
So I have comments about this. So first, have you considered some other locations like having a wristband? Because it can be like a watch and you have this and you can wear it every day, and you could imagine that let's imagine that you can do the perfect driving electronics and everything. You have the actuators on your hand, and you wear it like a smartwatch or whatever, and maybe that could fit. So first question is, do you think that you can translate your results to a wrist? So is it doable, or does it require some more work? And then do you think that besides the technical aspect, do you think that there are still scientific research questions that have to be addressed before being able to have a product that you can give to users and they can use in daily life?
Actually, we would like to, for example, the smartwatch is on the forearm. So for the web hand, we can we should make sure all the vibrators stay at the same place as location as our experiment. So the glove should be specifically designed so that when we try to take the glove on the hand, the vibrators can exactly put on the same place on the as the experiment. So it should be tested by the engineers, I think, because for now we haven't verified that the possibility of the same experiment. So it's more like for us, it's just more like a lab study, not the commercialized product, but it should be tested. I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can let somebody else ask questions.
Have you finished, Thomas?
Yeah. Go
okay.
on.
So I think it's my turn. First, Kaixing, I would like to say that I really enjoyed reading your manuscript. I was afraid because I'm the psychologist and it's a PhD in computer science, but it was really accessible for me. And I've learned a lot of things. I found your work very interesting on several points, making the connection between tactile exploration strategies and graphical and understanding and cognitive processing is really challenging. And I think your work brings something to make this link, even if sometimes it seems for me as shortcuts between what you observe on the strategy and what you can say about the cognitive processing. But it's not your field, so it's okay. You use different and very complementary indicators to evaluate the compression of graph. So you add recognition rate, exploration times, the path followed by the finger, and I think all these indicators are both necessary and complementary. So the work bring really high contribution on the indicator to assess exploratory strategy. I have first question about the tactile fixation indicator, because it seems to me quite innovative and relevant, but also I have some concern about it. The parallel you made between eye movements and tactile movements, I think it's relevant. In my opinion, the development of finger tracking methods as it been the case previously with eye tracking, is really a key to understand the cognitive mechanisms that underline tactile exploration. However, I'm not sure you can compare, as you do in your manuscript, eye fixation and touch fixation, because it has been shown that visual fixation corresponds to the moment when the individual gets information about the visual scene.
Yeah.
But in contrast, it seems that for tactual movement, it's the exploratory movement which brings the most information about what is perceived. So in eye movement, the scanning movement only serves to move the eye to one location to another.
Yeah.
But in tactual exploration, it's really important, the path followed by the finger. So my first question is, why did you choose to focus on tactile fixation instead of path movement of the finger? Is it about the technique, or do you really have like cognitive arguments behind this choice?
In fact, there's some reason. First, it's from our observations. That means people with visual impairments explore often the tactile graphics, and we observe that sometimes their finger stops or make some macro movements to get in the underlying information, graphical information. So we are considering about what this means, the micro movements of of the hand during the tactile exploration. So we started to want to know what this means, this type of behavior, and do people have already investigated this type of behavior, hand movements behavior. So after reviewing the related works, we found that these types of behavior had not been evaluated before, and so we were considering to compare this type of graphic movements with eye movements, and then we found that for eye movements, there is a specific definition called eye fixation, and exactly very similar to what we want to investigate. That means the hand stops during the tactile exploration. So, and then we leverage the definition of eye fixation and then define this type of hand movements as tactile fixation. Actually, this is just some similar behaviors, but as I presented before, there's a lot of differences between eye fixation and tactile fixation. It's more like it's us the first to provide the definition of this type of behavior movements, and so we want to investigate if this type of hand movement has the potential to improve the tactile exploration or the design of tactile graphics. So that is why we want to investigate the tactile fixations.
I'm convinced about the interest to study this tactile fixation. I'm sure it means many things concerning the cognitive mechanisms, but I don't think that they represent the same as eye fixation. I think they are very different. I'm sure the process is really different, but tactile fixation, it's something that needs to be deeply investigated, because I think they have some purpose that we need to understand better.
Yeah.
But I think the parallel with eye fixation, I'm not sure is the same.
Yeah, exactly. We just leverage the definition, the name, or the term of eye fixation to define the tactile fixation. It's just I think it's a definition of a term for me. So there are a lot of differences. I agree with that. Yeah.
But I think it's a good idea to study this indicator, and it has not been studied a lot before. So. I had another question, but Thomas asked it in part just before. I found interesting the use of tactile vibration to optimize trajectory tracking for simple geometric figure, at least, or simple path. But I agree with Thomas. It means that you suppose that it exists like a good way of exploring, or because the vibration indicates the trajectory the people have to follow.
Yeah.
But why do you think there is I understand for locomotion, for example, you have to follow a path and there is only one path. But for geometric shape or even for more complex shape, how can you use this kind of device? Do you think it's possible to use it?
Yeah.
I think it's almost the same question as Thomas, but
yeah, I can give you a simple example. For example, when we want to use the web hand to explore a rectangle, so when my finger is on the one point, for example, the point on the top left, so there are two directions that I can start my exploration. I can start with the right direction. I can start with the bottom direction. So for now, web hand, the system just selected automatically the one direction, for example, the right direction to start the exploration, and then my finger will go back to the initial points. So and then I finish this exploration of the rectangle. So for I can use like this one, this mode, but as you say that there are a lot of many other options. For example, which direction I should choose and which segment I should explore. But it's more depend on the scenario. For my experiment, I just want to know if web hand can help digital graphic exploration. So I'm not. We are not consider more about the how to select the direction and which strategy can be used to select the direction. We just want to verify that web hand improves the digital graphic exploration. That's that's our objective, and we verified that objective. And for future works, it's sure that some strategy should be proposed to improve to select the direction and finish the digital graphics more complex digital graphics exploration. So that's our idea.
And I'm not. I do not know very well this kind of design. Digital graph. What is the technology you have? Like the screen vibrate and indicate you where to put your finger?
Yeah.
Okay.
The screen, the tablet vibrates to indicate my finger touch the segment, and the web hand provides the vibration to indicate the progression and the direction.
Okay. And do you think this kind of device can replace raised line graph that we use at school, or it's only for adults?
I'm sure web hand cannot replace tactile graphics, but web hand has own advantages. For example, we can change easily the content of the graphics. We can as we want. So it depends on which case scenario we want to use. So I'm sure web hand cannot have the same performance as tactile graphics, but we can use that in some more flexible scenarios. So it's the difference between web hand and tactile graphics.
Okay. And last question, there is research in cognitive psychology that show that the cost of processing information contained in a graph is reduced if the legend is included inside the graph rather than put in a separate location. So do you think is it the same for visually impaired people? And how would you recommend to add legends in graph?
Okay. For now, I'm not sure because we haven't considered this question. So, perhaps there's a difference, I think, but I'm not sure for now.
So you didn't use legend in your graph, in your work?
No, I think.
No, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I give the floor to Anke.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for inviting me into this jury today. And congratulations already. I agree with everyone else that the thesis was very interesting and I really enjoyed reading it. I learned a lot and I'm impressed by the fact that you have been doing several things. You have mastered different types of technologies and interaction techniques and devices. You have worked with haptics, you have worked with image recognition, you have worked with touchscreens, but you have also been able to link your work to what has been done in psychology, what Florence has just been saying, which I think is something very important, and unfortunately many people in HCI miss doing that, so I appreciate that you've done this. And also I wanted to congratulate you for already having been recruited as an assistant professor before the end of your PhD, which is really rare, I think. And this is the link to my first question, which was for your future projects, either for yourself or for your future PhD students, or maybe for other researchers, based on what you have done during your PhD, what do you think is the most urgent things that people should work on now?
For me, I think most urgent is to establish a systematic knowledge of this domain, of a specific domain. For example, even though I have already 3 years experience, I think I'm still the beginner in this domain, and so the most urgent for me, especially for me, is to establish the whole overall perception of the current domain, so that I can know the other people is doing which type of research and which would have the potential for the future research. So this is most urgent for me.
Thank you. So we'll start at the back of your PhD thesis with Tactile Link. So the project about collaborative learning for people with impairments. So it was very timely given the pandemic. So I suppose that you have decided to work on this topic also because COVID hit last year, and this is a problematic that many people had to face, how to learn from a distance. So I was interested, did you already have an idea for another project before COVID hit? Like, what would you have worked on without the pandemic?
Actually, we have another project, more like a collaboration with other professor. But after after trying their prototype, and we didn't find we found that the prototype is not very compatible with our research, so we decided not to continue that project. And then then I began with this project for the collaboration. Actually, initially I worked for another project.
Thank you. So the previous chapter about the tactile fixations, I don't know if I missed this, but there was one of the tasks which had the purpose of identifying the images. Like, people had to say, is this I don't know, a map of France or a map of Greece or things like this. So I don't seem to remember, did you actually evaluate how good the replies were, like how correct the replies were, and if this is linked to the number of tactile fixations?
Actually, I think we have already evaluated this one. I'm not sure whether I have presented or not. But I just compared the number of fixations in terms of the task, hand, and graphic type, and then the interaction between the task and between the task and the graphic type. That's all our studies about the numbers of graphic tactile fixations.
So yeah, do you have any feeling if like people who use a lot of tactile fixations are better at identifying the graphic type or worse? Like, do you need more tactile fixations maybe because it takes longer to identify, or because you don't know and then you hesitate and you do a wrong guess, or is it like the more they do tactile fixations, the better the result?
Actually, in our experiment we have a specific design. First, among the 5 different graphic types, the first two graphic types, the 2D drawings and the drawings with perspectives, they are not accessible. That means they are not optimized by the tactile document maker. But the other 3 types of graphics, they are accessible to people with visual impairments. So after exploring the numbers and duration of, for example, numbers of tactile fixations, we found that there's much less tactile fixations in the inaccessible graphics. That means without the optimization of by tactile document makers, people with visual impairments can perform less tactile fixations. That means there are less points or areas of interest in this graphics. So this is verified by our results.
Okay, thanks. I have another question about this study. So you used image recognition, which is always, as you also say this in the thesis, so it's due to problems with lighting, for instance. So what I understood is that you manually corrected some of the frames in which the image was not correctly identified, and after the manual correction, you indicate, I think your precision is very high, like 95% or something like this. But I don't think you said how many corrections you needed to do, like how many things went wrong and how many things you had to fix manually.
I think I can give you an example. For example, one video is 60 seconds, and the video frame is about 30 frames per second. So we have 1,800 frames in total. And generally for the correction of the manual correction of frames is about 20 or 30 frames. That means it's very, very low because our video tracking algorithm has a very high performance.
Okay. Did you need some time to get to such good results to find the optimal lighting and optimal setting, or is it like today with the new cameras and new technology, it's actually quite good to start with?
No, we can just use the normal camera, and then I can just use my record the computer vision algorithm to track the fingers very easily. So it's not very difficult.
Okay, good. Thank you. And one last question. So for white hand, in your study where you evaluated on the vibration interface, did the participants provide any feedback or ideas on how you could further improve it? Like qualitative observations or feedback?
For now, the qualitative studies, we all use the we all use the 5 point. Sorry, I forgot the name of the method. The 5 point. Sorry, the qualitative. I forgot the qualitative method name, but we collect all the qualitative feedback for all the experiments, and I didn't present in today's presentation.
But do you have some ideas, maybe in your mind? Do you remember some of the feedback you received, which could be helpful to further improve?
Yeah, I have. I have. During the use of the web hand, when we ask a participant to use directly the simple tablet vibration, many participants told us that it's very difficult and I can't do this. So so it takes a very long time for a simple graphic. For example, 10 minutes for just 4 segments graphic, a rectangle like this. But then the same kind of participants, when we ask them to use the web hand, most of them told us it's very much easier than before, and he can know the direction directly, and it's very interesting for this. And just one participant complained about the web hand because she said she doesn't like the vibration on the hand. It's just a little specific.
Yeah, we observed this as well, that some participants tell us that they really like vibrations, they don't like audio, and others are like, I really like audio, I hate vibrations. So
yeah.
Trend, I guess, also. Okay, thank you. Done with my questions.
Thank you.
So I will give the floor to the supervisor, Christophe or Marcos. I don't know who wants to start.
I don't mind. Do you want to start, Marcos, or do you want me to start?
I can start if you want.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you. Well, I don't have any questions concerning your work, Kaixing, because I know it quite well. But instead, I want to use this moment to briefly comment on my experience as your PhD supervisor. So I met you 3 years ago. You had only spent 1 year in France, I think, at that time. And you were new to the field of HCI because you had a background in artificial intelligence. And first, I was quite surprised because you very rapidly learned the different methods and approaches of HCI, understanding how to design, prototype, and evaluate interfaces. And you also greatly improve your French, which is usually quite challenging. Throughout this PhD, you have worked very, very hard, and you always show determination to finish the projects and initiative. Actually, you led multiple collaborative projects. That was quite an achievement. So these days, we always must have a word about how the COVID situation affected our work. But in your case, I want to say that not only did you not slow down your work pace during the pandemics, but you even found time to conduct an initiative to import masks from China when they were lacking in France. And I tell this anecdote because I think it illustrates quite well the qualities that you also demonstrating during your PhD, and in particular your generosity and kind of overflowing energy, always capable of doing many, many things. So I will just conclude by saying that it has been a pleasure to supervise your PhD, and that I'm sure that a brilliant career awaits you in academia in China, as Anke said, and hopefully we can keep working together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, this is my turn now. Correct, France? Well, Kaixing, we've spent almost 3 years collaborating, and I have to admit that this is the first time I've spent so little time physically sitting next to my PhD student. I'm very sorry about that, but despite these difficult conditions, and thanks to many video conferences, we managed to talk about science. Then I won't ask questions, scientific questions, but as Marcos did, I rather use my time to say a few words about you and your work. And maybe I'm going to repeat things that Marcos has already said, but it doesn't matter. It's good to say things twice when they are worth saying. So we recruited Kaixing thanks to a program between the Chinese Scientific Council and the University of Toulouse. And at that time, it was a surprise because the program was just starting and nobody around us had taken advantage of that program yet. And when we received the Kaixing's application, I was not convinced, I must admit, because as Marcos mentioned, you have an engineering degree and with a specialization in artificial intelligence and image processing. So you knew about nothing about HCI and nothing about cognitive science. But okay, we did it. And I must say that I don't regret this having you in the team, Kaixing. Obviously, you made a lot of progress in HCI. We have a view of that during your presentation, but also in cognitive science, you managed to set up very good design and experimental methods, as well as data analysis. Anke raised the technical point, and I agree with her. You are good at doing technical things, but not only, because finally you publish very good papers in the best conferences. So that's the aim, what we are looking for. And moreover, during your PhD, you were able to start collaboration with different groups that you didn't mention during your presentation, but you have different collaboration and additional publications, and especially with one of the group I really enjoyed, the group of Suranga in Auckland. So after as Marco mentioned, you finishing your PhD, you have received a postdoc proposal, but finally you chose to accept the assistant professor position in China. So for all of that, congratulations, Kaixing. From my own experience, it's not easy, but you have made efforts to understand this new field of research and going towards the interdisciplinarity. I agree with Florence about shortcuts, but I really think that you are making a lot of progress, and you are in the good way. So you are really getting good at understanding psychology and cognitive science. So congratulations for that too. On the personal aspect, I must say that during this thesis, we have seen that you are a valuable colleague, both scientifically and technically, as I mentioned previously. I would like to strengthen your work capacity and perseverance, something that Marcos mentioned already. You are a very reliable person with a sense of teamwork, which is very good. I've never seen you angry or in a bad mood. So I take this opportunity to say again that it's very, very pleasant and easy to work with you, Kaixing. Before finishing, I just want to say a few words about our co-supervision with Marcos. That's the second one together. I have the feeling that once again it was a good co-supervision. So again, it works well. Thank you, Marcos, once again for joining on that project, and because we are engaged in another thesis co-supervision. I hope it will go the same. I want to thank our colleagues for joining this jury today and for asking very, very interesting and inspiring questions. There are many of them that have been asked and that I would like to discuss with you all. I hope we'll have opportunities to discuss this question during conferences, or if we can't make it during conferences, we'll have to make it on Zoom. Okay, that's not the same, but anyway, we'll do. Just finishing my comments with saying that Kaixing, I don't know if you will continue to do research in the same field of visual impairment and assistive technologies, but if you do, I hope we'll have opportunities to collaborate again, and I wish you all the best as you settle into your new position as an assistant professor. Thank you, Kaixing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So now the jury members are going to withdraw to deliberate. I don't know how do we process. Do we put Kaixing in the waiting room, or do we move in another room?
I think we go to another room.
Okay. Yeah. Because that Kaixing creates a new room for us, and
like before, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. I will do the same as. Okay. you can try this.
Kaixing, tu veux des ballons dans ton coin ou pas?
Des pétards. Des confettis. Des confettis. Qu'est-ce qui fait descendre?
Ben, il y a des bouteilles de vin dans le pain, je pense.
Hello again.
Kaixing. So, Nicola is missing, no?
I got to close the session. Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay, so we finished our deliberation. We agree that you made a clear presentation and that you answered to all the questions that were asked to you. After reading your manuscript, after listening to your presentation today, we agree to award you with the PhD degree. So with the title of Doctor in Computer Science from the University of Toulouse.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you want to say a few words.
Yeah, I'm very excited, and thank you for everyone. This is what I want to say the most now, and I think from beginner in HCI 3 years ago, and to now a junior researcher today, I really think all the efforts is worth it. And without the help of my supervisors, my colleagues, and other professors in our team, I can't make it. So anyway, thousands of words converge into one sentence. Thank you very much, and I will continue to work hard in my new job. Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, nothing to drink, huh?
Nothing to eat.
Either. Thank you very much, Thiago, Niklas, Thomas, and of course Florence and Anke for joining. Hope to see you soon in real.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me, and congratulations, Kaixing. Nice work.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Thank you, Thiago.
See you soon, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Merci Florence.
Mais de rien. Il faudra qu'on envoie un petit mail pour récupérer les signatures.
Alors, on peut passer sur une autre salle si tu veux pour finir la discussion, ouais. Parce que là, on est en YouTube. Là. YouTube
oui, d'accord.
Kaixing, tu peux pas couper le stream là?
Ouais. Okay. Ouais, je vais aller couper.
Bah, sinon, je pense que j'ai. On va bien aussi.
Il va faire 5 minutes de déjeuner, il va couper le
Ah, t'as ton PC ici.